Yeah, Lorelai's waiting to get in, but you can let her in, right, Mariah?
I just started the meeting, so everyone should be in, but I can make Lorelai a panelist.
We'll call the design review committee to order. Can we get a roll call?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Committee member Baranek,
Here.
committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
committee member Vanden Eyck,
Here.
chairperson Newsom,
Yes.
and for the record, vice chairperson Funk is an excused absence. So we have 4 present and 1 absent.
Great. Can I get approval of agenda?
I'll move to approve the agenda.
I'll make the second motion.
Yes, committee member Vanden Eyck,
Yes.
committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
committee member Baranek,
Yes.
chairperson Newsom.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
I'm going to now open it up to public comment. And public comment is going to be for anything that's not on the agenda. So anything other than the Barrel Creek project. Do we have anybody that's called in or?
You went, Heather, you're kind of going in and out a little bit. Does everyone else hear the same thing where we lost a couple of words there?
She was going in and out.
That could be an interesting conversation. Hold on a second. There, is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open up public comment. This is going to be for anything that's not on the agenda, such as the Barrel Creek project. So if anybody is called in or sent an email at this time, raise your hand. And we will look to see who wants to speak. I don't see anybody. Do we have anybody that's called in, Phil?
We'd ask Mariah, see if there's anyone that's called in that wants to talk about items that are not on the agenda. It looks like we have a lot of good attendees, but I'm assuming that most of them are here for the item today.
Yeah, just a reminder, I don't see anyone that's called in, but if you're calling on a phone, you just want to hit *9 to raise your hand during public comment period. But I'm not seeing anyone.
Okay. Annette, did we have any emails that need to be read into public comment?
Yes, when we get to that item, yes, I will read 2 emails that were received before the meeting and were emailed out to the committee members.
Okay, so at this point, I'll close public comment. Can I get an approval of the consent calendar?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll
will
make the
second.
second motion.
Okay, roll call.
Committee member Vanden Eyck,
Yes.
committee member Schmidt,
Yes.
committee member Baranek,
Yes.
chairperson Newsom.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, now we will hear the development project review, design and neighborhood compatibility review of the Barrel Creek project at 6010, 6020, 6030 Del Rio Road and San Ramon Road. And are you presenting, Kelly or Maria?
Yeah, Kelly's going to present this one. I'll just give a couple quick words just about this project. This is the very, very first view of it. I just want to mention, Kelly's going to tell you about the whole process and everything and where this is going to go. This is a very starting point, but just to say from a background perspective, this particular site has been eyed as a potential general plan site for many, many years. And in fact, there was policy adopted on this site about a decade ago to focus on looking at this site as a target area for rezoning and an amendment to add to the city's commercial stock because of its location at a commercial node. But let's go ahead and talk about it from a design review standpoint. We're also talking about this today from a process standpoint. And this is certainly by far not the very last step in the process. It's the very beginning. And from here, it has to go through an environmental review process and then on the planning commission and on the city council, and then for a second reading at city council. And we're likely to repeat one of those steps along the way. because that's just how a project of this scale will come together. So definitely want to value the community input at this point, but there'll be also many other opportunities for community input as we go through this particular development. But for now, this will be the unveiling of a project you haven't seen yet. We did see a preliminary version of this project back when the council first looked at it, but it's changed a lot now. They've responded to a lot of things. So Kelly, go for it. I don't want to take your wind away.
Right, Phil gave half my presentation, but I'll go through those anyway.
Sorry.
So the project is located in what's currently the residential suburban zoning district. So typically in that district, we see lot sizes of about 2.5 acres in this location. So this is a rezoning request and general plan amendment. The site area is about 15.4 acres. So the general plan amendment was authorized by City Council in December 2019. I think there was a lot of public comment heard at that meeting. And so the applicants have gone back and refined the design to respond to that public comment, and then officially submitted a month or so ago. So in general, the application is to change from that residential suburban zoning to a higher density residential, although they have modified that original multifamily component of the project. And then also have some commercial zoning along the Highway 101 frontage. It would include a corresponding zoning map amendment. There would be a custom plan development overlay zone to sort of lock in the style of development that's going to happen on the site and provide some assurances to the neighborhood and the council, ultimately the city, about how that development is going to occur on this site. There would also be a corresponding master plan of development to lock in the architecture, the site design, some of the site features, and then a tentative track map for a subdivision. So the site currently is about 5 parcels under single ownership, which is why we can consolidate these parcels for a larger development project. It is across Del Rio Road from Apple Valley, which has a 1 unit per acre overall density, but did get an affordable housing density bonus. So they are at a little bit less than 1 unit per acre in terms of their overall lot size and pattern. That does also include sort of the park area and all the roads that were calculated into that density. It does have Highway 101 frontage, as I mentioned, and it is bisected by a drainage feature that was determined not to be jurisdictional, but it is a fairly deep drainage feature. There is some riparian habitat off the project site to the west. So it kind of bisects the project area and then runs along the western edge of the project site. So the current proposal is for 25 single-family residential lots. That's kind of on the southwesterly corner of the site across from Apple Valley at the San Ramon Road and Del Rio intersection. So that was a portion that was originally planned as multifamily development with some higher density apartments and townhome uses. But the applicants did respond to some neighborhood concerns and brought that down to just 25 single-family parcels. They do still have a multifamily component. They have about 40 apartment units in 4 buildings on the westerly edge of the site adjacent to the commercial portion of the project. They retain the 120-room hotel at the northern boundary of the project. And then they have approximately 53,000 square feet of commercial tenant space, which they envision to be sort of that light industrial commercial, breweries, restaurants, sort of artisan manufacturing things of that nature. So this is the overall site plan. You can see here is Del Rio Road, and they sort of had their main entrance point off of Del Rio adjacent to the previously approved RV hotel project. There's another entrance and egress point here on San Ramon Road. The green line sort of indicates that drainage feature that bisects the project site and then borders it to the west. The multifamily apartments are in this location up here and 4 buildings of 10 units each. This is sort of the main commercial space with a pedestrian plaza in the center of the space, and then Highway 101 off to the right-hand side of the screen. So in terms of access, the City Council did adopt a plan line setback and plan line for Del Rio Road at a meeting not too long ago. And so that does restrict access on the Del Rio entrance point to right in, right out only. So it is theorized that cars would come in this direction. There's kind of a looped road around the commercial portion and accessing the multifamily. And then the main egress point is out San Ramon Road. There is a speed table provided in this location here. So basically that's a raised portion of road that helps to slow traffic down for safe pedestrian crossings, but it can act as a looped road and connector point for vehicles as well. If vehicles do exit off Del Rio Road, they would turn right out of that exit, and then to get them back towards the freeway, the applicants have provided a roundabout at the intersection of Del Rio Road and San Ramon Road, so that we're not directing traffic into existing residential neighborhoods and across that small bridge that goes to Monterey Road, but instead cars would be able to go around that roundabout and then filter back to the freeway. So the applicants are providing a fairly decent parking throughout the project site. They wanted to maintain the commercial portion as a very walkable area, and so the parking is along the outer edges of the commercial portion of the project. They have on-street parking wherever possible, and then as you get into the commercial portion of the project, they have pull-in parking to maximize the parking space and lots provided. So based on their current use estimates on their plans, they would need a minimum of about 348 parking spaces. They have provided 419, which is above the minimum that they could get with a parking reduction. But that will also allow for flexibility of uses in the commercial buildings should they be a slightly more intense use than what was anticipated originally. The parking also includes 20 covered parking spaces for the multifamily portion of the development. And that covering will have solar panels on it as well. So this is the proposed drainage crossing. Again, it wasn't deemed jurisdictional by the project biologists that went out and looked at the site. It's definitely sort of a deep and used as water drainage, but it doesn't have a lot of riparian characteristics on the project site. However, the applicants want to use this as sort of an aesthetic feature. It does back up to their very small scale amphitheater that they've designed into the project. And so currently they're proposing some culverts for those crossings with head walls and some grading. Staff is recommending some arched culverts or a freestanding bridge over those areas just to enhance the aesthetics and comply with our general plan policy that does require naturalized bottoms for drainage features. And we really wanted to sort of focus on naturalization and utilization of that as an aesthetic feature of the project. So the central commercial plaza goes the entire way from the hotel development to the north to the very small scale amphitheater to the south. It allows for ample outdoor dining opportunities. They have some shaded trellis features, some walkways and some stairs. So the current concept, and staff is asking for additional information through our plan check process, does include some fairly significant grade changes within the commercial plaza area of approximately up to 6 feet based on the sections they've provided. So staff is recommending at this point that we try and work to minimize that to allow maximum flexibility, but also to note that the applicant does have some reasoning and some justifications for the grade changes that they've proposed, and we'll hear about that from them later. So this amphitheater is quite a bit different than the one that we saw with the Del Rio Ranch project, and I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. It's a fairly small scale amphitheater built into the side of the existing slope down to the drainage feature. And so with the Del Rio Ranch project, it was approximately a 300-seat amphitheater. This is very much smaller and kind of more of a passive use space. There is a very small stage down at the bottom, but it's envisioned to be a lot more passive, similar to the one in San Luis Obispo by the Mission, and is even slightly smaller than that potentially. So neighborhood character is one of the main findings that the council will ultimately have to make for project approval. And that's kind of the main concern of the design review committee. It was sort of a primary concern at the authorization hearing when there was a lot of high density multifamily planned on the corner of San Ramon Road and Del Rio Road. So the applicants responded to that by greatly reducing the density of that area and actually providing for a small lot single family subdivision that is very similar to the Apple Valley lot layout. And then in terms of the commercial area, again, it is adjacent to the Highway 101 frontage, and there is that natural drainage that runs along the western edge of the project to provide some buffering, in addition to the multifamily residential units that provide a transition between the commercial and the existing residential zoning. So you can see with this overlay down here, the residential subdivision, the lots are slightly smaller than Apple Valley lots, but not considerably smaller. So the applicants did try and keep with that lot pattern that you see in Apple Valley. This is sort of a diagram of what typical lot layouts might look like. Currently, the single family is not designed as part of this master plan of development, but rather they give design guidelines for future construction of those lots. They have parameters such as architectural features and setbacks and things of that nature to ensure compatible design. So the architecture for the commercial and light industrial portion of the project is kind of what we've been seeing. It's kind of a rural agrarian with some contemporary accent features. So it uses a lot of metal siding and board form concrete. We have a lot of metal accent features in terms of trellises and some wood added in. They are using a lot of varied roof forms and some clear story windows to relate to the more residential scale of the adjacent properties and the adjacent portions of their project. And then the hotel definitely has a more contemporary flair to it. So the hotel includes materials like corten steel, backlayed with some stucco. There's sort of what look like wood panels, but I believe that those would be sort of a metal wood look so that they don't deteriorate over time and remain a quality material. And then using a color scheme that has, you know, darker and lighter colors with natural features mixed in. So the multifamily portion of the development is more of a contemporary craftsman style development with some cleaner lines than what we would see as traditional craftsman, but still has some of those elements. And it brings in materials such as the board and batten siding and metal awning features, and then varied roof lines. So from the parking lot portion of the project, it mostly appears to be a two-story building with some gable roof features that allude to the third-story nature of the building. And they're also using some stone accent features along the base of the building to bring that natural material in. So as I mentioned, the single-family houses are not fully designed at this time, but they are proposing to have design guidelines to allow future development to be consistent with the surrounding neighborhood and with their project. So they've provided some preliminary design guidelines that I believe were in your packet, if you could read them at the font that they were printed at. And staff does have some clarifying questions as part of the plan check process for this. So these will be further refined as we move forward in the process. So in terms of height, there's a couple different height scenarios going on, and these will be addressed as part of the plan development overlay zone, as they're allowed to kind of have a custom zoning and custom height. So for the single family residential subdivision, their proposed height is 30 feet. And that's typical of our residential zones. So that should not be a problem at all. The multifamily apartments are at 40 feet, but it can vary based on the downhill side of the building. So the portion of the building facing that riparian area to the west can be maybe considerably is the wrong word, can be a little bit taller because of the slope nature of the site. The commercial tenant buildings at 35 feet is consistent with our existing code. And then the hotel, they're proposing up to 60 feet for their architectural roof features and just under 48 feet for the top of the occupied floors. So we are requesting that the hotel be granted a height exception as we don't want other buildings within the planned development to reach this height necessarily without going through an additional process. And so that will be part of the approval process as well, and what we would like DRC to weigh in on as well this afternoon. So in terms of signage, they have a very preliminary signage plan. They actually did provide a number of monument signs that would be entry features into the development. One placed at the Del Rio Road entrance and the other near the speed table there as you enter the commercial portion of the development. So they have a couple different options and a couple different materials that they're looking at, and they would like DRC's direction on that. Staff has requested an actual sign program for the rest of the commercial portion of the project to ensure that we have consistency when applicants and tenant spaces actually develop. So the applicants are going to be working on that through the plan check process. And then of particular note is some of the hotel signage facing the 101 freeway and then facing the north. So the north side of the hotel facing an existing single family residential property is where the actual entrance is to the hotel with sort of a porte cochere type feature. And they do have some hotel signage there. So there was a recommendation from staff that that signage in particular not be internally illuminated and only have external illumination that points towards the building and is kept at low levels. The signage that faces the 101 is a fairly design-oriented signage. However, it is fairly, could create some potential light pollution. And so staff does have some recommendations in the conditions for DRC review that include maintaining that at a lower light level and maybe having some screening from adjacent properties to the north in particular for any light spillage that comes from that sign. So the applicants are also proposing a water tower feature as kind of an identification feature for their project. They don't have it fully designed at this time, but there are a couple of examples that they've provided. It would be at this location here, directly adjacent to the 101 freeway, just as you go over the bridges from that drainage feature, and would be approximately 65 feet tall. We did converse with the applicant, and while this is a tall feature, it does actually sit lower than the freeway overpass at Del Rio. And so this height does provide for visibility in both directions. Site lighting is proposed to be a variety of lighting types, including bollard lighting, especially throughout the plaza area, the string accent lighting in the pedestrian spaces, perhaps some in-ground lighting that helps with identifying architectural features and enhancing them, and then sort of the gooseneck style, more industrial style lighting that faces down. So we do expect, light spillage and dark sky compliance with the majority of these lighting styles. Through the plan check process, staff has also asked for a more detailed landscape plan, but in general, they've provided accent landscape features at the project entries and street trees throughout the development. They also have a landscape palette that's drought tolerant and complies with the state and local codes for landscaping. Of particular note, I just wanted to point out they are proposing a landscape buffer along Del Rio Road between the sidewalk and the project parcels that could potentially have some privacy fencing along them, similar to Apple Valley. Staff has in our plan check corrections also asked for a similar buffer along San Ramon Road to allow for that sort of planting and minimize any 6-foot privacy fencings right along the edge of the right-of-way. So Phil touched on this a little bit. This is sort of the very first hearing in this larger general plan amendment process. So we are at DRC this afternoon to just receive public input and DRC input to answer any questions. When this comes back, we'll be doing some additional staff and CEQA analysis that will include greater detail on traffic impacts, noise, air quality, biology review of the site, things of that nature. We may come back for another DRC hearing as they refine the design if we feel that it's necessary to get some additional input based on their modifications. And then ultimately it will go on to Planning Commission for recommendation and then City Council for final decision. So that's kind of the general process that we go through. It's not a very fast process. The CEQA analysis will probably take some time, and so there will be opportunities for additional input throughout the process before we get to the decision makers again. So just to summarize, we're asking for DRC input and public input on site design, architecture, landscaping, and a couple of those particular points that we brought up in the staff report and throughout the presentation. And I think that concludes staff's portion of the presentation. I know the applicants are also online and would like to give a brief presentation, or we're available for questions before that happens if you like.
Thank you, Kelly. At this point, does any of the DRC members have any questions of staff?
I do.
Go ahead, Emily.
Question for staff regarding the initial design and layout presented, proposed. Specifically, if the original proposal had higher density residential against Del Rio, what did the other components look like and what was their layout originally? The commercial, the hotel, originally were we looking at the same components, roughly the same ratio of units and square footages for commercial, or has this changed significantly? And if so, in what way and why?
Sure. So the commercial portion has not changed significantly.
Okay.
They did always intend to have a hotel and this sort of commercial plaza concept for their commercial tenant spaces. Where the multifamily is currently proposed, they did have a number of short-term vacation rental units that were basically designed as full residential units with their own sort of individual parking, either carport or garage. And it was a little bit more intense along that side. So they have shifted in this current concept to just the 40 multifamily units in that location. The corner of San Ramon and Del Rio had sort of townhouse development where there were 3 or 4 units per building facing those street frontages, and then more of a sort of a central parking area design. And then internal to that, they had a 3.5 story higher density apartment units.
Okay.
So I think the numbers are in the staff report that I don't have in front of me on what their original unit count was versus today, but I believe it was over 100 units, and maybe Phil can look into that and in that area of the site, and now they're down to 25.
Yeah, I was just looking at that.
Okay.
It was well over 100 units originally, and so the residential density has dramatically been reduced, which is very substantial in terms of its reduction in environmental impacts, and also really getting a lot closer to neighborhood compatibility. So
Sure.
it's come a long way.
And the staff, or I don't know what body reviewed and gave feedback, but the lower density residential against Del Rio was in response to specific comment. Were those the only comments provided and therefore the only ones responded to, or were there other revisions made based on input and community feedback?
That was essentially it. See, when this project hasn't come to the design review committee prior.
Okay.
The process they go through is basically called city council authorization. It goes directly to city council to determine whether it is a project that we can process, whether it's a project that the city council wants to authorize to process, since it's a general plan amendment.
Sure.
So simply they went for that one hearing, they authorized it, but with the authorization, they did ask the applicant to make significant changes to increase neighborhood compatibility. But primarily that change was addressing the residential character and compatibility, and to evaluate traffic and to evaluate aesthetics. And I think it was general. So there wasn't very specific recommendations given out, and it wasn't very detailed in terms of looking at all of the commercial and giving feedback to that. But it was generally thought that the commercial at that time was well received, and it created a logical land use for a land use right on the freeway, where it's never been viewed to be an ideal residential location along that freeway location.
Sure.
And I think part of that is just the nature of the general plan authorization hearings being incredibly conceptual in nature. So I think, the council basically states, and Heather can chime in too, that in general, sort of the concept of the project works or doesn't work or might need to be tweaked in these ways. But really ultimately then there needs to be further analysis and community input and DRC input and planning commission input to ensure that, all of those findings can be made.
Understood. Thank you. That's super helpful.
Dennis, did you have questions?
Yes, please. You had spoke about the riparian area. Could you show that on the site map of generally where that is? See, I'm wondering, there's a sag in San Ramon Road there. That water collects quite a lot.
There is a low spot in San Ramon Road, and I do not believe that it is along the project frontage.
No, it's not.
Yeah, so this is more of where we start to see some riparian vegetation along the drainage. And then the drainage
Okay.
does come out up here somewhere, but I think there's also, and probably the neighbors can, I know I drive by it and I get stuck all the time and have to go around, but I don't know the exact location of whether it's caused by that drainage or whether there's another low spot a little closer.
It's
towards the
kind of
project.
across from the first lot that's adjacent to this project,
Mhm.
if I recall. There was a discussion about lighting. In terms of other types of lighting, will there be street lighting required along the project frontages?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily require street lighting unless it's needed for a specific safety concern. So this subdivision will follow, I don't know if Nick DeBar is on line too, Mariah. So this subdivision will follow our standard requirement that we do not do street lighting for residential subdivisions unless there's a specific safety need at an intersection. Of course, having said that, there will likely be some level of parking lot lighting for safety throughout the commercial portion of the development. I believe that that's a code requirement. A lot of times we do add a condition that the parking lot lighting be on a motion sensor past a certain time at night. And so that lighting can be very, very low. And then if there's movement, such as a person, it does become a little bit brighter so that they can see better. But we do try and keep light levels low throughout the city, and then especially on the west side.
Why is the main egress point onto San Ramon?
Sure, and again, staff has asked for some additional traffic analysis to really point to how many trips are anticipated out of both of those entrance and egress points. The way that staff currently is looking at this is that crossing over the speed table might not be the most obvious exiting strategy if you're coming around from this side of the development. And so it just might be a natural movement to come out San Ramon Road. Having said that, the traffic can certainly come out Del Rio, come around the roundabout, and then head back towards the freeway if that's the direction they're going in. But as we tend to know, people take the path of least resistance usually.
Yes, and that's, and the traffic study will probably identify this, but all the homes that exit Monterey Road to the northwest, isn't Del Rio basically the only single output for that whole entire area? And so they're going to be coming to the intersection of Del Rio and Monterey, and then turning up the street. They're going to run into the runabout and then make their way to the freeway. There's a lot of traffic that goes that way. I'm wondering what's going to happen traffic-wise, as you described just now, as the people going out San Ramon Road. I see them, the more convenient, the simplest way to get out might be turning right and going up towards the Home Depot area. They get back on the freeway, and then that you have San Ramon Road there. It's kind of a fun road to drive, but there's a lot of whoop-de-doos, a lot of speed that could be picked up in that area, and I think that would probably be a concern of a lot of the neighbors in that area. I want to say one thing about the parking for the commercial area. I see that as a plus. I like the fact that they're using the perimeter outside for most of the parking, and I don't see why more people don't kind of push the parking out to that point. So that's I really appreciate that. Has there been any discussion about the focus of use? Is intended to be a mix of residence and highway, or is there a focus that they're trying to get?
Want me to fill it in, Kelly, or you got that one?
In terms of the commercial portion of the development, or?
Yes.
Yeah, so we're still refining that with the applicant, and they can probably hop on and speak to that as well. They definitely are trying to get some restaurant spaces in there, some potential like brewery and tasting spaces. But based on their parking calculations, they also have a large amount of sort of, light industrial type spaces that could be, less pedestrian oriented, and a little bit, lighter on the parking load. And so I think they're still trying to refine the mix of commercial uses in that space and make sure that their parking and access is balanced to accommodate.
I like to call it visitor serving industrial.
Well, with the light industrial, that kind of changes, makes it more local. I mean, I would say that maybe the brewery might be somewhat local. And the reason why I'm kind of talking about that is, again, is how this traffic is going to separate from the project. And I would say most locals will probably go down to Del Rio and Monterey versus going back to the freeway unless they live on the other side. I would say most people who live on the west side would go down across that small bridge and then make their way south or north from there. And so that would be, for me, if I was visiting the site as a citizen, I would take that way.
Yeah, I will say there's definitely significant local demand for this kind of land use. I think a lot of people are heading to Paso to get a very similar land use experience. But yeah, the latitude for this kind of a location, for this kind of building type, it's pretty flexible in terms of land use. And I think we would design a plan development that way, but it's really something that we hope to become experiential, where you have someone who's making cheese, you've got someone who does coffee brewing, you've got someone who might do wine, you've got someone who might sell bicycles, you've got someone who might have a light manufacturing business and they do glass blowing, and so they want to show you their crafts and their artisan things there. And you might have something that holds 7 household jobs and they happen to be a design firm. So there's flexibility in this to really cater to kind of the contemporary land use. Right now we're in this change of land uses, and the old retail model, I keep saying this to the Planning Commission and DRC, is changing, and it's changed a lot just in the last couple of years. And it changed a lot from the internet, and it continues to change as we head through this pandemic. So.
Yeah, but I mean, and those changes are the dichotomy when you tried, what was noted at the very beginning, neighborhood character was a significant issue to be discussed. And so again, I see the use, a mixture of people using the use, and my concern is more traffic related and how that's going to be distributed as it leaves the site, with some going towards the freeway and some going up San Ramon towards the north and others going to the west to Monterey Road. And I don't think there's anything, I think there's roundabout could be a kind of an impediment to that, although they're supposed to circulate traffic differently than what I'm saying. Neighborhood character is really interesting in that I've traveled San Ramon Road for a very long time. I'm a very slow driver, and I take that road. I have a 1924 Model A that I love to drive on that road. I don't see how any of the buildings that are being shown right now being of any type of neighborhood character within that area. It's very eclectic.
Is that a question or a comment?
A comment. I don't see.
Are we on comments yet, Heather?
I guess what I'm seeing is the architecture is more of one that we see being built everywhere, and not mixing with what there is for the neighborhood. and that's just interesting. Is height part of neighborhood character? What I hear comments made is that they're within the code, therefore it's acceptable, but it's not something that's of character for that area. So it's a strange dichotomy. Anyhow, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Jeff, do you have any questions for staff?
Yes, I do. A couple things. The plan that we showed doesn't show any kind of improvements on San Ramon along the frontage. I assume that they're going to be conditioned to do frontage improvements on San Ramon because they're up against that as well.
Yes, we have asked for that in our plan check comments. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a standard street section. I know Nick's on the line as well and can weigh in, but there will be frontage improvements along there as well.
Okay. And I'm glad to hear that they'll be coming back with a traffic study that, my concern is we're doing a lot of development down in this area, and as we get one development here and there, I want to make sure that we get them all together so we see what the impact is really going to be on those materials. The other question is there enough right of way to have a traffic circle there without having to do some right of way acquisition?
It does appear from their plans that there is enough right of way. I think Del Rio Road is slightly wider than our typical west side right of way. And so they have plotted that out, and it does appear that they wouldn't necessarily need to encroach it. I think it might be even a little bit offset towards their property to make sure that it fits. But at their current level of plans, it does appear that there would not need to be right of way take on the adjacent properties.
Because their exhibit C3 indicates that the property lines actually go into the traffic circle. So that was one of my questions about that.
I'm not sure if those lines are accurate for the right of way on their plan. That was one of my plan comments too.
Those are my comments for staff right now.
Okay. I have a couple questions. Circling back to the roundabout, how is that going to affect the emergency exit route of those that are in the back neighboring areas that use Del Rio as an exit point?
You want me to take that one?
Yeah, design of roundabouts.
Sure. It shouldn't affect it at all because it's really meant to keep traffic flowing. So if you figure there was going to be an emergency evacuation, those cars aren't going to be doing 35 miles per hour through there. They're going to be a steady line of cars. In fact, it might even make that intersection a little more efficient with moving vehicles out.
I will also say too, a lot of times they're designed with sort of mountable curbing at the roundabout to allow like a fire trucks or larger scale vehicles that need to move back and forth in an emergency to not make the full circuitous route around, but able to come up into the roundabout slightly to make sure that their path is not impeded.
And then is that roundabout, it's hard to see on the images, is the roundabout at the Applewood entrance, or is that
Apple Valley? Yes.
Or Apple Valley, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. I think that's all my questions for now. Did we want to go ahead and bring on the applicant to do their presentation?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and let in Darren.
And then I'll open up public comment after the applicant speaks.
All right.
Probably Darren and Scott will be doing the presentation, and then I know there's more people in their team available for questions as well.
Okay, I've promoted Darren and Scott to panelists, so I believe that allows you to share your screen for a presentation.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Poor Darren, I think he like shook in his pants there for a second. What are you making me do? Thank you all so much for the opportunity. My name is Scott Martin. I'm a principal at a local design firm, RRM. I'm a Atascadero resident, so I'm very passionate about this project, and I apologize if I get a little overly excited. Thank you for the opportunity today. Thank you all for doing this from your home, from your office, from your work. I can't even imagine what this is like to have to go through this in these times. So thank you for your dedication. We really appreciate the opportunity. I briefly want to touch on a number of things that was brought up in the presentation. I'm going to do my best to share a screen. I talk with my hands though, and I'll probably end up drawing on the screen because that's what I do. So I hope everybody can see this all right. Does everybody see the beautiful picturesque commercial center that we all want to go to? I see Kelly saying no.
You see your Zoom screen?
Oh, really? Well, maybe I can switch it over. Hang on. Never sure. Can you see it now?
There.
Whew. Technology doesn't completely fail. I love it. So
Gotta love technology. You got it.
Careful, Phil. I'm not sure. Love-hate is the relationship I'll go with. Anyways, thank you again for the opportunity. I really, Kelly, fabulous presentation. I think the background and the story there is quite great. I want to give a little bit more as to sort of where we've come from, what the applicant is trying to achieve here, and why I think this is maybe one of the better projects that Atascadero could ever see. So the site plan, wow, it's colored, it's pretty, it's engineered, it's not done. We get it. There's a lot still to come here. I think the important elements are there though. And I think we're looking for your honest feedback about where we're heading and making sure that we're still fine tuning this in a way that is appropriate. We have a saying on projects like this, you usually get it right about the 20th time you draw the site plan. I think this is version 30. So I think we might actually be honing in here. We've had a lot of feedback. We worked with staff for years to get to this point. We've worked with the applicants. We've worked with the council members. We've had study sessions. We've gone, as Phil mentioned, for the initiation to actually get the process approved towards the general plan amendment. We've held neighborhood meetings on site, handed out chocolate chip cookies as pure bribery to the adjacent neighbors, and actually got some of the best feedback I've ever gotten in a public setting and public forum. So it's been a great process, and I think this project continues to refine and get better along the way. And we're hoping that your contributions do the same for this today. So I think Kelly did a great job going into it, but I want to just sort of touch upon a couple things. First, ingress and egress. I've seen a number of different potential solutions here along Del Rio for how we go. Right now, the traffic study we've had done, and through Nick's excellent guidance with the city, the right in, right out is what's going to be the safest and most appropriate. Now, we're still working. There is a proposal that I think you have seen with the adjacent property neighbor. That's somebody else we're trying to collaborate with and work with and see if there's not a win-win solution there to make this ingress and egress even better here on Del Rio. But it is the project's primary goal for this to be your primary ingress and egress. Fire and other departments, of course, are going to require a secondary egress, but we're hoping to really focus that back on Del Rio where it belongs. As previously said, there was an apartment project planned for this piece, this residential piece. We think that is our best opportunity for neighborhood compatibility, is residential next to residential. That's why the commercial is so close to the freeway. Our lots are similar to what's happening at Apple Valley. In fact, some of the neighbors even came out and said, we want to stand here and look at this side of Apple Valley, and we want your side to look pretty much the same. And so that's kind of where we've been going. If you look at the height and mass of some of the homes in Apple Valley, we think we're very compatible. Little smaller footprints. I think that's a changing housing dynamic that everybody should become aware of. I think some of the rural Atascadero homes that many of us own or have remodeled over time are changing a bit in dynamic. And that has to do with the housing crisis that's across this state and our own local jurisdiction. So we are looking for a slightly smaller, more obtainable housing product. I think it'd be a great little neighborhood and provide a good transitional element into the site itself. Careful, the words roundabout, everybody goes like right to Europe and thinks we're doing 60 miles an hour around this turning signal or this turning circle. This is really the result through the traffic study, through engineering. We're trying to get people onto Del Rio to be able to come back to the freeway if that's what their desire is. I am a West Side Atascadero resident. I'm not sure. I think I just cruise right on through and keep going. So I think it will vary depending on where you're coming from. This is definitely a solution that we have vetted and tried to get within the property lines. I think there is some take on our side, like Kelly mentioned, but we think this actually could become a bit of a traffic calming measure and a feature to not only this project, but this neighborhood, and start to give a little definition to Del Rio itself. We've been out here, I've seen the flooding. I think I drove my Jeep through this one day, went, whoa, how do people do this? Unfortunately, we haven't had much of that this year, but we are looking at the site on a whole and trying to solve some of the drainage problems. I think we do nothing but make the drainage better for the neighbors by handling some of the runoff and water that we're dealing with now. As you look at a existing grading plan, I apologize, this is turned 90 degrees. The site kind of tops out here. This is San Ramon here. And a lot of this water right now is running down into here. Here's the adjacent neighbor. And this is about where that flooding starts. We're going to put a water treatment facility here, a way to handle, slow down, meter that water, try to get it into the ground so that we're actually helping to solve the problem along San Ramon. The rest of the site, I just want to reiterate, this is a drainage, to even use the word feature might be a stretch. There is some riparian and some other great features along it, and we plan to sort of enhance this drainage channel, but it's a pipe from the freeway that gets water through our site. It is not what the general plan envisions as a feature. We think we can make a feature out of it. It's that whole turn lemons into lemonade. There's some beautiful oaks out there, and I think these culverts, I think they actually can be enhanced in a way that adds architectural character, project character, and identity to this overall site. The idea of freestanding bridges are it's a bit of a reach for a project of this scale and magnitude. This really, we think, can be handled very well in a culvert. We also want to note that the flat sites are gone, right? So when you look at the cross slope here of this site, there's quite a bit of fall heading towards that drainage channel off property. That's really what we're doing with that internal commercial plaza, and why you see some steps and some undulation in there. I want to talk a little bit about what commercial plaza means. You know, this is not Home Depot. Thank you, Commissioner Smith, for talking about parking. This is simply a destination sort of retail spot. So we don't want to end up with walls all along the side of this property. What we're trying to do is minimize that as much as possible. So instead of flattening the whole site, we're terracing as we come down. If any of you have been out to Tin City and had an ice cream at Negrati, I think it's one of the greatest things ever when you can sit on their little deck. My kid loves doing that and listening to the music that's down at the Tin City Cider or whatever. We see some of that undulation and that change in elevation. Sometimes I wish it was more than 6 feet. I think that 6 feet is going to feel real nice. It's going to offer opportunities for benches and outdoor plazas. It's going to create the sense of a series of rooms strung along a larger commercial plaza, but gain a little bit of identity and specialness to each one of them. This is not, Phil started to say it, this is not a commercial project. This is not a strip center. This is not the Del Rio outlets. This is Makers. This is an experience. This is where I hope you can smell Joe Bella coffee roasting and grab a cup of coffee. This is where I hope Hush Harbor is baking bread on site and selling sandwiches out the side door. And that's why there is that industrial focus. This is the best chance at a jobs housing balance Atascadero's seen in a while. So we are trying to create some real jobs to it. I think there is a housing balance that comes along with that. Each of these apartments here and the single family, that does create a customer base. We're trying to create a walkable community. Atascadero has struggled at best at enhancing its pedestrian connectivity. So that's why the tabletop connection, that's why some of the traffic calming features is we do think this is a part of a neighborhood, and we do think you don't have to just drive here. In fact, we want to encourage you not to. We'd love to see some more restaurants. We'd love to see so the idea of breweries and wineries and cheese shops like Phil mentioned. We don't want, and I don't even think the developer would allow things like standard strip retail. There is no freeway serving, no drive-throughs, no gas stations. Everything you see that everybody wants to put in, this is the opposite, because this doesn't work unless you have the whole synergistic site together. It is a destination, and it's a big undertaking because of that. It involves quite a bit, but we think we're actually dealing pretty well with the topography of the site, and we think that those changes in elevations are actually a good thing in the end. Architectural character. Wow, what is Atascadero's architectural character? I've had the pleasure of diving into that question a little bit more. Commissioner Schmidt, I appreciate your sort of take on it. It is eclectic at best. There are great examples and not so great examples of many different architectural stylings in the area. Of this number of homes, we think it's important to have some cohesion, much like Apple Valley does. That first little pocket neighborhood has some cohesion. We don't want to copy Apple Valley. There's a bucolic nature to the site right now. As you drive by and you see the funky little Quonset hut on the neighboring site, there is still an agrarian sort of theme that we would like to relate back to. That has been contemporized and modernized over time, but we think it can be very appropriate for Atascadero, and we think it lends itself well to the architecture that we're proposing. One of the reasons being some of the steeper roof pitches. So what was really important to us, especially on the 3 stories, that's when people just about lost it when we had our public hearings, is any building that was 3 stories. Well, we think we can do a multi-family residential product that mainly has the 3rd story buried in the roof. That's one of the nice things about that agrarian nature. The steep roofs allowed for side windows or some gable features, and the bulk of the project ends up having a 2-story street face while still gaining a couple of units in the upper floors. So we like the agrarian nature, the farmhouse feel. We think it fits well with the sort of industrial agrarian structures. You know, this is Tent City. This was based on that idea of you prop up something with a gable form. We've taken some of those local vernaculars, whether it's the hay bale cover or the tent itself, and tried to extrapolate that in a way that is derived from context, but rooted in a new sort of exciting destinational commercial experience. So that is the architectural concept to the whole project. I think Kelly did a great job of showing you some of these. We can talk a little bit more about that. On the hotel, we definitely, you know, I can show you a number of great agrarian inspired and influenced buildings that do nothing but, you know, house hay. And we really enjoyed sort of that juxtaposition between the natural, the metal, the raw material, and how that gets stacked and aligned. That was our inspiration for the hotel itself, for some of the signage, for some of the forms. and interpret it in a way that we think could be a really special project. So with that today, I'm happy to answer any questions. I've got a team of people here who can hopefully answer anything, but more than anything, we're looking for your opinion and your direction. We're going to be back. We're going to be back to a number of public hearings. Here's your opportunity to become a vested partner in a great project and make it better. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Scott. Dennis, do you need to ask a question of the presenter, or can we open it to public comment first? You're muted. Sorry, I can just see your hand.
Thank you. Scott made the comment about the Quonset hut being on another property. I'm kind of surprised of that. Scott, could you show the topo again to see, so I can see where the Quonset hut is?
I will do my best, but I kind of failed the first go around. Let me see how I do this time. Here's our packet. I'm going to go back to our full entitlement package, which you have. This is the Quonset hut, right? It's right next door. It's just off property to this. Again, sorry to get the whole thing on the topo. This is the freeway. It's just north of the project.
And so the Quonset hut is where?
The adjacent property.
The existing Quonset hut. It's off of Del Rio Road.
Maybe we're talking different.
Yeah, I think there's two Quonset huts. I think the one to the north of the property is a larger one used as their accessory structure. And then I think the one that we all think of is the one on the church property, on this property, that serves as the food pantry. But the one to the north is at sort of a larger scale.
Don't see that one as much. Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, I'm going to open public comment to any of those that want to speak. Please raise your hand. Then I will try to go down my list here. And
just a reminder for those calling in to press *9 if you'd like to speak. That will raise your hand and we can let you in.
thank you, Mariah. Looks like the first person I see is Peter Laughlin.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Well, I guess I can't show my face, huh? Okay. Peter, this is Peter Laughlin, Laughlin Company. I thank you, DRC, Planning Commission, planning members. I'm a very vested developer in Atascadero. We're building the Emerald Ridge apartment complex, and we have a few other projects scheduled. And we are also the proposed developer for the RV hotel, which is, I hate to use the term RV because it's not really RV, but it is RV, but it's kind of a interesting concept that's going to be really high end and really, a great addition to the city. I think this project, Barrel Creek, is on the right path. I think it's for example, the kind of the Tin City concept and the transient, tourist commercial, as well as serving the local neighborhoods, is a great thing. It's definitely on the right path. It's just as far as the design, one thing that we have a concern with, and I'm not sure if you have the, I'll just look at the site plan. If you're aware of our project, our entrance and exit is actually 5 feet to the side of where their main entrance and exit would be located. We already are dealing with a freeway. We're dealing with Del Rio, and now another exit or entrance to a major commercial development that would, our use is a very low density hotel use. It fits in really well with residential. And I think that's one of the things that the DRC and planning liked about it. It wasn't obnoxious. It wasn't 10 stories tall. It fits in really well. It's a quiet use. And I like how they've developed more single-family residents to the west of our site. My big concern, and I've shared it with planning, is their entrance being right next to our site. You can imagine our people sitting out by our fire pit, in their hotel, which is one-story hotel units, having, service trucks, a freeway right on the edge of our property. So I would hope, and I know that they've reached out to me just like 30 minutes ago, and the first time we did talk maybe a year or two ago. And I gave them my plans, and they have them. They actually sent them into some of their plans, but we really haven't heard from them as far as how we're going to deal with this entrance. And as per our conditions of approval, we are, we're open to discussing with them a win-win situation. So one thing I might suggest, and when I talk to them, I'll discuss it, is maybe having a little bit more of a buffer between our site and their site, maybe pushing their entrance down Del Rio a little bit. The other thing is, what are those, for example, the road C and the road A, are those bridges, or are they just dipping down into the culvert, like the road, or are they actually going to suspend a bridge across both sides?
Peter, when we're done with public comment, I'll have them address, or we'll address.
Oh, okay. So anyways, so that's a concern. That's my major concern, is the traffic in and out, and having a buffer, and then their signage, their main signage, not being so close to our signage. Maybe it could be pushed down the freeway a little bit. And then there's the other thing is, if we were to try to work something out with them, we're going to start building here in the next couple of months. They're years out, so it would be a significant cost to them to redesign our site and take us off operations. And so I don't know what their capability is and what they're willing to do. So that's a big issue. And what else? The amphitheater is a concern that it could be, like to be able to regulate the noise, that there's not concerts there, in the wee hours of the night. But I think it's also a benefit to our use. I think their whole project is a benefit if it's done right, and they respect, what our needs are. Will be a great project. So it's really noise for us, and light, and not having too much of either, that it would actually disrupt the operations of our hotel. And I think that's our main concerns, and we appreciate your time. I appreciate your time for listening to our concerns.
Thank you, Peter. Do we have anybody else wanting to speak at public comment? And Mariah, I think we have a couple emails to read into public comment while we're waiting for anyone to raise their hands.
Yeah, I think Annette has those.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The first one is from Courtney Rossi Wagoner. And it says, this letter is in regards to the proposed Barrel Creek plan development. My family has owned property off Del Rio for over 100 years. Those of us who have decided to live in this area purposely chose a specific way of life. The quiet, less cars, and sound of frogs and crickets is the only sound at night. My husband and I purchased a home in April 2020 that directly backs up to Del Rio. This proposed development is everything we don't want across the street from us. This development feels like a slap in my face, like a middle finger saying that no one cares about our quality of life and the reasons we chose to live away from cars and apartments and noise in general. I'm extremely concerned about the noise and adding apartments. Cramming so many buildings and apartments, etc., into a petite plot of land is the exact opposite of this area, and it will change this area not for the better. I'm very worried about my day-to-day quality of life if this is built and the noise and night and extra traffic. Please do not let this development happen. It will change all our property values and our quality of life, all while ignoring the reasons why everyone who lives in the neighboring area have chosen to live here. Very concerned, Courtney Rossi Wagner. The second letter is from BJ Morris. And he says, the design of the existing Home 2 hotel is apparently excused for not conforming with the style of the commercial buildings in the rest of the city of Atascadero because it is set apart from downtown. That should not relieve it from the same charm and design requirements of the rest of the town's new development. The West Side neighbors are very concerned. It is a fear that upcoming projects will have the same lack of design concept and are just being built to provide revenue at the cost of aesthetics. That hotel's design proves to be a bad precedent, and future projects need to have a more pleasing design aesthetic to fit into the upscale community that borders Templeton. We want to follow the guidelines of good taste that they have proven to have at the Trader Joe's site and the surrounding single-family home community across the Del Rio and San Ramon intersection. This would include adherence to dark sky lighting plans. Design is a key factor in the desirability of the neighborhood, home sale values, and quality of life for those who live near the project. The traffic pattern and overloaded intersection is a major concern. Gridlock resulting from residents and tourists on one lane intersection who are attempting to shop or commute through the intersection is not the sleepy village feel that we want to maintain. The eyesore of the Home 2 hotel's design is proven to conflict with the Atascadero general plan in that excessive the height and poor design and coloring do not reflect the Spanish history and other designs nearby. I'm asking that the DRC think carefully prior to approving another mistake like the Home 2 project. Invite the local neighbors to see and weigh in on the plans before pushing through amendments without research and proper notice to the residents. Yours respectfully, BJ Morris. Now then, BJ also contacted us because he was having difficulty getting onto the Zoom meeting, and our IT department is looking into that right now. But he did send a couple of other emails. I will just quickly read his comments. Too many residents are proposed, and we want to keep excess traffic off Del Rio and the Little Bridge. We do not want more traffic lights and a hotel that ends up abandoned or low-end retail. And we on the west side do not want to lose the small bridge over the creek and do not want increased traffic in that area. And that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you. I see that we have Nicole Kudlik wanting to speak.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. Thank you guys for letting me share. I live currently in the Apple Valley neighborhood. I've lived here for 9 years. And when we purchased my husband and I purchased our home, we knew that eventually that vacant lot would be developed. Our hope it would be that it would just be, again, more residential homes. I don't know a neighbor in Apple Valley that is excited about this project. I've yet to meet them. We are just very concerned about the traffic, about the amount of tourism that this is going to bring. I've lived in Atascadero for almost 38 years, so my entire life. And my great aunt lives on San Ramon. And back in the 60s, when they purchased their home, they wanted the rural feel. And that's kind of what I wish Atascadero and wish the City Council and the Planning Commission would stick to. We have 4-H animals, we have, chickens, and this is just not what I feel like is the best solution for this spot. I think it's a great idea, but I think it's a better idea downtown area. My concern is the lighting that may come from the hotel and the apartments. I know that you guys said that there's going to be low, impact on the lights, but the one thing I love about living in Apple Valley is that we have no street lights. We have one solar light when you first drive in, and that's it. I love that I get to look up at night and still see the stars that, that's just dark sky. I'm a little concerned. I don't know if you guys could answer this. Are you guys going to be allowing parking on Del Rio? I'm not sure if anyone can answer that for me.
When
So-
we're done with public comment, we'll start to
Okay,
address.
got it. Okay, great. So currently there is parking on Del Rio, but my fear is that this development goes in, that more cars, the overflow, maybe on a big Saturday, if they're having, you know, a band play and they're doing some event there, that the overflow would park behind our homes. Right now, that is very low impact. Every once in a while, we'll have a car parked on Del Rio, but that's just a concern. I know of a lot of the neighbors here. Another question is, we were just curious about the cost of the residential homes. Do you guys know maybe what they will be going for? And then my other thing is just, the traffic that comes down from the hills of the west side. There already is quite a bit. And then now we're adding the RV development across the freeway, and now Barrel Creek, and plus all of those homes up in the hill. Del Rio is a main street for those homes, and I'm just very concerned about the traffic. So these are just few of my concerns, and the lighting, the traffic, and just trying to keep the rural feel. These apartment buildings and this hotel is going to be looking directly in the backyard of some of these residents on San Ramon. And I'm glad I don't live in those homes right now, but I have a lot of friends that do, and they're very concerned as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next speaker is Jeff. Looks like you're muted, Jeff. Maria, what is it? Star 9?
I think to unmute it might be *6 if you're on the phone.
There we go. Thank you. We tried to do this. This is Jeff Laughlin, and I have a few concerns. And I'll start by saying I think the project's fantastic overall, and there's just a few concerns that I think need to be addressed. One being, I'm concerned about traffic flow, and I know we've heard that from other people. But if you have that many folks going into the hotel and everything, coming off the freeway or going westbound on Del Rio, making a right turn in, that's probably a good thing, but making any form of a right turn out is probably a bad thing, because that's going to add the traffic flow on Del Rio to that roundabout. And I think it could back up traffic further than what we need. And being I do live on the west side, I do have concerns with traffic flow. I think the adjustment that's been made on the roundabout now and where it's being located is way better. I am concerned for the folks that are on San Ramon, and that's basically the lighting concern with a lot of those folks, including myself, that happens to live a block over. We sit in the hot tub at night. We like looking at the stars. We don't like looking at street lights. So I want to make sure that we're protecting our rural area with lighting. And then the outflow I'm concerned about onto San Ramon, and how that's going to actually work and not back traffic up, both going westbound and eastbound on Del Rio. I'm not so sure with, you're potentially talking an extra 200 cars. And I keep an eye on the home 2 every morning, and their parking lot's full. And the majority of those cars leave within about a half hour or 45 minutes of each other. So I'm just concerned that traffic in the morning and traffic at night may be too much for that neighborhood to handle, and want to know how we mitigate that with just one lane of traffic. And the bridge at 101 is still a one-lane traffic, not two in each direction. I know there's discussion about widening that. We also know the city has just decided to change the intersection at San Ramon and 101 and change the whole way that it goes on that side road. And I apologize, I don't remember the side road there, because traffic's backing up at that light. So those are really my concerns on that. And then another thing for DRC or planning or the city, what about some lot line adjustments for us residents to where maybe you split the lots to make it advantageous for future building or future sales for us as residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else wanting to speak? Please raise your hand or press *6 if you called in. Nicole, are you looking to speak again?
It looks like Nicole and Peter Laughlin have both raised their hands again.
Okay, so we're gonna go with Nicole and then Peter, and then you can try to address.
Do we double check to see if there's absolutely not anybody else that wants to talk before we do second rounds, or?
I looked, I don't see anything, and I don't see anything showing up. What about you, Maria?
No,
good?
it's just Nicole Cudlack and Peter Laughlin.
I just had a real quick thing that I wanted to say. It was a positive thing. So I just wanted to say thank you to the developers for changing and moving the apartment buildings up to the more north. That was definitely a great change. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. That's it.
Thank you. Peter, you got a short comment or question?
All right, can you hear me? Just real quick, I just thought of, we're trying to create some synergy here, hopefully between developments, and you might want to consider, Scott, we could do a pedestrian link between my site and your site, because when people are going to come, they're going to be coming to, stay in an incredible tiny house like concept that's really high end. And they're going to want to go shopping over there, and they're going to want to walk over there with their dog. I don't know if you're going to I'm going to have a little dog park area, but they're going to want to walk over there, and that would be pretty cool. And to create some synergy so that they're not having to leave the site and then go down, walk through a residential neighborhood to get over to the commercial. So that's just want to throw that out when you're thinking about some design. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. All right, one last call for any comments. Okay, I'm going to close public comment. I'm going to bring it back to discussion. I did make a couple notes that I wanted to ask staff before we, as a DRC, start to having our comments and discussion. Phil, there was some different discussions. Do we have a corridor design plan based on different parts of the community? I think in the past we've had a conversation about developing a portfolio or a design theme. Is that in place yet?
We have the El Camino Plan, which we're going to be bringing back to City Council here shortly to talk about that. It has some design themes in it. It's primarily, though, for the El Camino Real corridor south of Del Rio and those areas of those commercial nodes. This particular area is mentioned in our general plan as a prime candidate for an amendment, but we don't have a design plan for it, and nor do we have specific citywide design guidelines that speak specifically to those particular topics. So really at this point, design is subject to general plan policy. It's subject to our archaic design guidelines and, open to neighborhood comment and the design review discretion. Keeping in mind that oftentimes design is somewhat subjective, but still neighborhood compatibility shall be the prevailing factor. Which is one of the key considerations of this development, is why staff and other and the council previously guided them towards agrarian, which is really what Atascadero is. Atascadero is agriculture related. Atascadero is barns and animal related items, and that is what I think the applicants tried to reflect in this particular project, is that appearance.
Thank you. Parking on Del Rio, is that something that's going to be allowed in here?
No.
Okay. And then
I don't know that that's true. It's a collector road, and I think full build out does include on-street parking for Del Rio on both sides. Nick, maybe you can weigh in.
Welcome, Nick. There he is.
Sorry. Yeah, currently on the Apple Valley side, there's on-street parking. So it's existing right now on the south side. I'm trying to think of the plans. I don't think they showed it on the north side with their plans, but that's something that, you know, the committee thinks should be necessary. We can look into that feasibility.
Okay. Thank you. In the past, we've asked developers price points on housing. Is that something that's been discussed in the early stages, or do we have any idea, just as a curiosity? Phil?
I think the market's going to be driving that. We're not going to be looking to deed restrict housing unless we do get some affordable units in here. And so it looks like these lots are slightly smaller than Apple Valley, and it looks like the home sites are a little bit smaller. And that, I think, as the applicant mentioned, is the current trend right now. And it's the current thing we're trying to get is a little bit of affordability by design, given that housing prices are so over the top. So I think that's a really good question for the applicant team.
Okay.
And they really, all they're going to be able to give us is an estimate, because by the time the project's done, you know, in a year or two from now, if it gets approved, everything could change again, because it feels like right now residential real estate has hit a pretty significant peak, you know, and the median house price has really, really gone up. And we're seeing projects like Grand Oaks with those tiny little homes still, you know, in super high demand. So, you know, the applicant is obviously, they're going to have a hard time answering that question, because obviously they want to sell the houses for what the market will bear.
So biggest question was there any deed restrictions? It sounds like it's early on, and at this point, that's not been something that they presented.
Kelly, you want to weigh in on that, whether we're going to have anything like that in terms of housing requirements?
So the project needs to comply with our interim inclusionary housing policy. Of course, we're moving forward with research towards adoption of a better, more current affordable housing program, which may not include as many deed restrictions. So we haven't discussed it. I would imagine that if there were any affordable type units, they would be second units and ADUs that are built as required by state law as part of the single family lots. There might be some discussion with Planning Commission or Council about some of the apartment units, but we don't envision the single family dwellings as being deed restricted for a lower, very lower income. We do see them as, you know, the affordable by design, smaller for moderate and workforce housing.
Okay, and then the last question I have for staff is lighting on San Ramon. Can we address the lighting that's, I think we talked about before, there's no lighting required on Del Rio. What about San Ramon?
Yeah, we don't typically do street lighting unless we have to. I can give that over to Nick for more detail.
Okay. Yeah, right now the general plan only allows street lighting along El Camino Real, the downtown district, and then at intersections that the city engineer deems, you know, a state where street lighting would help safety of it. So, yeah, we want to kind of maintain that night sky if we can out there. I don't think there's any street lights in Apple Valley either.
Mention how many times I'm up in the middle of the night looking at the stars outside. So I'll open it up to a discussion of committee members. I'm going to start with Jeff Vanden Eyck.
Myself, I think overall, I think they're on the right track here. I do think that lighting is going to be a big issue that we're going to want to make sure we don't disturb that night sky. That's really important for most people that live here in Atascadero. Also, I'm very interested in seeing the traffic study, and hopefully it would address some of the proposed construction that's going on, or the proposed projects that are going on as well, so we can see the overall impacts of what traffic will be. I think the traffic circle, I'm all for them. I think they function very well. Overall, I think the concept is good, but I think that we need to listen to some of the comments that have come through regarding the amount of traffic, and I am concerned about putting traffic right on San Ramon. I think that the primary entrance should be off Del Rio. Entrance and exit should be on Del Rio, so we don't force people onto San Ramon. So those are my comments for right now.
Okay, Emily, give me just 1 second. As a housekeeping call, as soon as we have our comments here, then we're gonna open it up to the DRC discussion and we'll go down the staff points to make sure that I don't miss anything. As a reminder, I have to leave out of here by about 4, so I will ask someone to step up into my place in a little bit. But I will try to address all of the staff questions after we do discussion. So Emily?
I actually have a question. I'm looking at, some older Del Rio area specific plan graphics and wondering from staff what the plan is for the Ramona Road realignment and how the two entrances that seem immediately adjacent and yet neither actually exactly aligned with what I'm looking at for the eventual Ramona Road realignment work together. Has that been looked at? Has there been any discussion about bringing these two property owners together to talk about coordinating that so that we could potentially improve that Del Rio Road ingress egress situation for the two of them?
Yes, there has been discussions about them trying to coordinate a consolidated driveway. As you heard from Peter, I don't think there's been a lot of discussion as the applicants have been developing these plans, and he's at permitting stage and ready to move forward. So, but he's open to communicating. So we'll see how those talks go at this point. We've also asked for some additional information from their traffic engineer about the proximity of those two driveways and whether it's actually safe and, reducing conflicts to have those two driveways so close to each other. So that may necessitate a move of a driveway on the Barrel Creek project, farther to the west, depending on the traffic analysis. I know, Nick, in the plan line setback that was adopted, Ramona Road does get realigned, and there's it's sort of like a modified median. I don't know if I'm describing that correctly, Nick, where people from Ramona will still be able to go left, but people on the other side from the Barrel Creek development will not be able to sort of go left. So it's going to be unrestricted from Ramona Road through the use of median design, but it will be restricted to right in, right out on the north side of Del Rio from the two project entrances and exits.
Yeah, that's correct. And Ramona Road does need to be realigned just to get more queuing or vehicle storage in the eastbound direction at the southbound ramps. So that is one of the assumptions with the plan line to accommodate all the future development.
Okay.
Dennis, are you done, Emily? I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Dennis, you have a question?
Yes, I'm muted.
I know. My mouse never goes fast enough.
Nick, how is right in and right out going to be controlled? Is it the similar way that we have other areas of right in and right out that everyone doesn't follow?
No, there'll be a median in the middle of, currently the plan line shows, and I could pull it up if you guys want to see it.
Oh, okay. So the street median.
Yeah, there'll be a street median. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now we'll go through the DRC discussion items. We're going to start with staff's request on site design. Looking at site circulation, what are you looking from us, Kelly?
Well, I think we've heard some comments about trying to limit access as much as possible, egress on San Ramon's side, and impact that neighborhood as little as possible. So we've kind of already heard that comment about site circulation. I think that dovetails into if we are limiting traffic to San Ramon, what are we doing at that speed table to make sure that traffic does go back towards Del Rio? So we will be asking the applicant those questions and clarifications. So unless there's anything else anybody wants to add to the site circulation discussion, I think we have that topic.
I'm here somewhere. There I am.
My screen's changed. Go ahead. We move to a different side. You can talk.
There was this discussion about Peter and the relationship of the road to his property, and I'm just wondering out loud if the main road that's adjacent to the property right now could not be separated more towards San Ramon, and then in doing so, maybe put some residential lots in between the road and Peter's development, but maybe provide some buffer, and that might be an idea for them to consider to try to accommodate that if sharing isn't allowed. It's very tough with Peter being so far down the road with things to make some drastic changes.
Well, I will add, our original intent was to really have these projects have synergy with each other, just like Peter was mentioning. And we really wanted them to share a driveway in doing that and act as though they were one project, even though it's two separate owners. And that's really what we have tried to collaborate with in getting those two owners together to try and talk about that. So we're hoping the project can act more and more like that rather than trying to create a wall or buffer between the projects. And I think that's what both of them are also after. Obviously these are two projects that will provide synergy for each other and will work very well together. And when you've got lodging and you've got these kinds of uses, it's a perfect accompaniment, as long as I think the concerns that are addressed, as Peter mentioned, such as hours of operation and noise and glare. And all of those things can be accommodated by project conditions and the CEQA review for this project.
And is Peter's project he was talking about RV serving? Is that what that project?
No, it's actually, the word RV really shouldn't be in there because it's a technical term. He has got a motel project that is very similar to Flying Flag's resort in Buellton, where they have fixed units. We'll call them small home units. They're units that are affixed to the ground that you can stay in as lodging. And so, and they're not tiny homes. They're much bigger than that. They're probably going to be more along the lines of 400 square feet or so, and can serve up to 4 people in each unit, with lofts and the like, and each have a kitchen. So it's a motel is really what it is.
Where does the RV come from then?
Well, because the units themselves are pre-built, they're pre-manufactured, and they actually have what they call an RV tag. And so the state sees them as an RV, although they're not an RV in the like that you and I see an RV that drives down the road. They are a modular unit that's been built in a factory, and then final assembly is done on the site, and then they're fixed to the site.
Like a park model.
Yeah, it's different than the Del Rio Ranch RV Flux.
Yeah.
What is the formal name of that project, Emerald? Peter Laughlin's, what's his formal name of that project?
Kelly, what is the name of the project?
Sorry, I spaced it too.
I don't remember what he is calling.
Peter will have to write it in the comments for us. I'm so sorry, Peter. We've seen a lot of different names today.
Laughlin Lodges. We'll call it Laughlin Lodges.
I think he's going to call it the Laughlin because I think it's his first flagship.
I don't know what their role.
So funny. So I would like to recommend that we do have some collaboration between those two properties. I think it's going to make this project function a little bit more smoothly. And I think from the rest of the DRC committee, everybody's agrees that there needs to be collaboration between these two partners. Would have liked to have seen it happen a lot sooner, but now is a good time. So with him saying he's breaking ground in a couple months, now would be an ideal time to kind of get together after this meeting. Location of uses. Did we address that, Kelly?
I think in a roundabout way, I think we've heard that sort of the small lot single family subdivision and the multifamily are sort of used as a transition. So unless anybody sort of has any objections or comments about the citing of those uses, I think we can move forward.
Okay. And as a reminder, I can't see all of you on my screen with the presentation. So if our DRC committee wants to make a comment, you can, there you go. I see you now, Dennis. Go ahead.
Thank you. It was interesting, the comments about the mixed use or multi-use structures being moved from the corner to the inside, and how that was compatible with Apple Valley. But there was no discussion about how those uses would be compatible, about the existing homes that they back up to. I do think the comments that Scott made about tucking the third story into the roof lines of the buildings is very helpful in trying to make that work. But I'd be wondering, I mean, it hasn't been discussed about, is there going to be any outdoor activity areas behind the multifamily structures that would be introducing? I mean, I think a wonderful noise, kids playing and things like that, but obviously it's going to make a change to the atmosphere in which those homes have that exist along San Ramon Road. So I think that there should be some maybe more emphasis in cross sections or something to show the relationship of those buildings, how they relate to the trees that are in the creek, if they're lower than, things that would help screen that higher use next to those lower use homes.
You got that, Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, commercial plaza grade changes. I think you discussed it in your presentation earlier that you were trying to adjust that grading point.
Yeah, staff is concerned that with the grade changes, we might not have the vision and the level of flexibility of use of outdoor space. But I know the applicants also presented, that there's that 15 to 25 foot grade difference across the site in the commercial portion of the development that they're trying to accommodate. So I think we'd just like some input on their theme of having those grade changes within that commercial plaza space, and if we move forward in that direction, any focus that you want to have on how those spaces relate and connect to each other.
I don't think we wanted to say it's an extremely negative issue. What we wanted to say is bring it to your attention that it's something to look at. And honestly, I think the applicant team presented it in a way where now I think I understand it. It might actually provide some interest, but I guess it's just something to be aware of and see what the DRC or public think about that.
Yeah.
Jeff, did you have something to add?
Yeah. I actually think that the grade changes between are good. There'll be a lot less grading on the side. It'll keep it more of a natural kind of a condition, and I think it'd be less impactful to also the neighbors if they keep it kind of in that same, on the same grades that they are right now, and just make it work with what they've got. I like the different changes.
Yeah.
Hey, Dennis.
I agree with those comments by Jeff. I believe what was explained by Scott and shown by Scott is that they're more than capable of making that transition work well, and will satisfy everyone's potential concerns.
Okay, I would agree with that. Emily, anything to add?
I concur.
All right, on to the second topic, architecture. We had Phil talk earlier about what the El Camino Plan design is, and trying to keep, trying to understand how our community looks as a whole is always challenging. Depends on which side of the city you start. Just depends on if you're in a gateway area. It depends on so many things. What are you looking for us in regards to design theme, Kelly?
I think just in general, they have their contemporary craftsman design theme for their residential areas, and then their, more agrarian and contemporary design theme for their commercial areas. So, I think we heard some comment today from, the neighbors, that maybe, a more contemporary design theme they don't see as in keeping with the neighborhood. But then as you heard from staff, we don't have required design themes throughout neighborhoods. So I think this really sort of is at the purview of the DRC and direction to Planning Commission and Council on whether these design themes are appropriate and can meet the findings for neighborhood compatibility as the project moves forward.
Okay, I'm gonna have Emily. Do you have anything you'd like to add?
On that specifically, not yet, no.
Okay, do you have anything to add to building heights while we're under here? I'm coming to you, Dennis, don't worry.
No, I think that, given the similar building heights across the 101 corridor, I'm comfortable with it. I think I can understand some concern specifically regarding height for the neighbors that the hotel will be immediately adjacent to. I don't know how to resolve that. That I'd say that's a concern of mine. That hotel being pushed so far back on the site that it's immediately adjacent to a large lot residential parcel would be my only concern for height.
Okay. Dennis? Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay, I get your lower voice. I use the word eclectic. Scott used the word eclectic. From what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing eclecticism, which for me would be more of a compatible issue than what it is now. I think it's kind of a difficult thing to deal with. And if you look at the lot areas that they're proposing in this single family area, they're all very uniform. There's a reason why, and that's because they'll probably have 4 or 5 footprints that'll be, reversed, flipped over. They might have some changes on the outside, but it makes it easier to build lots or to develop lots that way. There's no question about it. However, I'm wondering, and I don't see why people don't do it more, especially when they have a development overlay, especially in residential areas, have different lot sizes and have, for instance, a lot that's lengthwise versus depthwise along the street, or something, have a 50-foot lot and have a 30-foot lot next to it and have a smaller house. And then you kind of create some eclecticism because a lot can take so much. And the only time I've ever designed anything like that is in the areas in which they have hillside controls on slope, where a lot can be smaller because it's flatter and steeper because it's bigger. But not being the designer of the project, I wonder if it has been considered to try to mix the areas of the lots so it creates, it kind of forces different designs within that area. And to me, again, when I go down San Ramon, there's everyone has built their dream home on San Ramon, and every one of them is different. There's no tract homes, for instance, like at Apple Valley. That's all basically the same because it was the way it was built. But San Ramon Road's completely different, where it's been individuals who have built their dream on every lot.
Thank you. Jeff?
I actually like the design, and I can kind of understand what Dennis is saying, although, from a development standpoint, that would be extremely difficult to do because you have to have multiple house plans and price points and everything. They're trying to keep them all together. Anyway, the overall design theme, I like it. I think that the agrarian is great for the commercial, and I also like the kind of the rural feel of the single family. I don't have a problem with any of those, or the building height.
Okay. So I'm going to be the anomaly today. I know as we start talking about neighborhood compatibility, and each property is going to be different around the existing area. I do like the different, sorry, got all my plans laid out. And in the various samples on the mixed use, they highlight both a farm style and agrarian style. I do like both of those designs. However, when I do get to the hotel design, I feel like it changes up a little bit. And I'm not a huge design fanatic, so I don't know what terminology to use. But when I look at it, I start to see a little bit more of maybe an industrial or a modern look. And I can see why some of the neighboring owners are a little bit concerned because it doesn't look soft or nurturing or like a wood. When I look at it, to me, and it could be the images, kind of present as a hard metal, more industrial for me. So I'd like to see more along the lines of the farmhouse, the agrarian stuff to a rural community feel. Do I like the concept of the project and I've watched it evolve drastically? Yes, and I am very happy with the direction in which this has come to. But I would like to see a little bit more, not as hard, I don't know, shapes or pool area, for example. And you want to pull that up, Kelly, on the image? The one that says character render pool size. I don't know if you have it. I think you have the big version of it.
Let me see if I can get there real quick.
Bird's eye view.
Yeah, and it's harder because with the design review committee, we do have bigger plans. So we're able to see it a little bit more in a larger scale, which makes it easier. But when I do pull open the inside of the pool area, and again, I'm not a designer, and everybody that goes by my house might say I have an eclectic or needs to be finished, you know, all of that sort of stuff. It's called full-time working parents. Anyways, I just want to make sure as we take a piece of land and develop it, I want to make sure that it conforms to the community around it, as well as invites, when people drive down that corridor of 101, the images that they see off the highway is going to be the focal points. And so both the one before that, Kelly, and then this one are the two that I see that might not be as farmhouse or agrarian. And that's just my take on it. I'd like to see a little bit more softer design, maybe not as hardscapes like that. When I look at it, seems more Art Deco Florida style. Sorry, I'm probably going to get quoted on that one. But that's just my feedback. Sorry, Scott.
That outside perspective kind of reminded me of Templeton Granary.
And maybe it's because the front part is popped up and it says no vacancy is a little, you know, industrial for me. It's just my take on it. So.
And I think maybe sort of this design feature, while it probably works really well for the hotel and privacy, Heather, when I hear you talk, I think it's this feature maybe that is not as well, where, you know, whereas some of these materials, you can see how they're more agrarian. But when we move to this, maybe not so much. So the applicants heard your feedback and we'll see what we can do with that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I know before they used to bring in design boards and we could feel and touch stuff and actually see it. So as we do everything electronically and remotely, it doesn't give the same feel. So
it's kind of one of those things of what you can see from the street and what you can't. I mean, this area is a very private area in terms of public view. And the only way you're going to see it is if you stay at the hotel.
Staycation. I don't have an issue with the building heights. I think that's already been addressed. It's nice that the applicant has taken the community feedback and tucked the third story into the roof and kind of hit it while still utilizing the spacing. So I'm good with that. We can go ahead and move on to landscaping if no one else has any comment on the architecture. Okay. Drainage crossing design culverts versus clear span bridge. I think you've heard from the community want to keep as much as they can, and I believe that addresses the bridge. There was some conversation about keeping an existing bridge.
Yeah, I think that referred to the bridge across Graves Creek as you hit Monterey Road.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I think we're looking for direction on, you know, arch culverts, clear span bridge. We heard from the applicant, you know, that they're also working on some supplemental information to show, you know, how culverts could be used to enhance and naturalize and how they would landscape that. So just if you have any thoughts or direction on that, you know, knowing that the applicant is working on some design details to greater explain their current culvert design feature.
Dennis?
In that the drainage feature really isn't a drainage feature. Is the city opposed to Phoenix crossings or basic crossings at grade, you know, that drive down, drive up through the culvert?
I would defer to Nick, but I think there's significant enough water flow through that area where that would not be appropriate.
Okay, street trees, and again, very conceptual at this point in the single-family subdivision. And 50 feet tree, 50 feet tree, 50 feet tree, so on down the road. I guess that's, everyone has to have a tree in their landscape area, but it seems to me, why not have a couple of trees here and then a bigger gap and a couple of trees there versus this kind of postage stamp look going through it.
Anybody else have any feedback on the trees, drainage?
My only, yeah, it's not really a drainage, but there will be significant runoff through there. So I would prefer seeing an arch culvert instead of something with a solid bottom on it, just to kind of keep the more natural feel of the bottom of the flow channel. But I'd like to see what the applicant comes up with.
Okay, and Emily, you had nothing to add?
No, I agree. I trust they'll do a good job with the culverts. They can be nice features, and the landscape design that they have is attractive. I'm sure they'll do something similar.
Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
I don't know the cost of the arch crossings on Dove Creek along the freeway. Those are, in my view, are very beautiful. And, they're dropped in, so they're prefab. But in terms of costs, I'm sure they cost more than a culverted crossing, but I don't know.
Okay, Kelly, you got our feedback on that. We can just go to the next point of walls and fencing adjacent to Del Rio Road. Emily.
In the staff report, sort of, we discussed that these are kind of the rear yard areas along Del Rio and San Ramon, really. And so, any thoughts on that? I think we heard sort of from the Apple Valley neighborhood, sort of through the applicants, that something sort of similar and matching would be appropriate. I think staff has commented that to the design team as well as part of our plan review. But any additional comments that you may have beyond that, we're happy to pass along.
And I think on the street of Del Rio, we did an extensive conversation with Peter Laughlin of how to blend that and how to give some privacy. So I'd like to see some continuing from one project to the next. I mean, I know one's residential, larger backyards, that kind of thing, but I'd like to see some of the same materials probably used. And as you start to, the two developers start to work together, I think that they'll start to come to using some of the similar materials as well. Emily, what did you want to add?
No input. I'm happy with what's proposed.
Jeff?
Yeah, no additional input. If they can match what's over in Apple Valley, I think that's fine.
Yeah.
Dennis?
I don't know if there's sound issues, but if there are, then that's the reason why Apple Valley has a block wall, and it might be the same reason these people have block walls along the residential areas. Sound attenuation for homes is different than for hotels, and backyard sound attenuation is more critical than front yard attenuation. So that might be a reason for what they're proposing.
So I think currently Apple Valley has wood fencing, but definitely if some noise analysis comes out of the SEQA review that requires something different, then we'll have to work with that as it moves forward.
Does the staff have what they need from the committee?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I'd like to thank the applicant for presenting. I'd like to thank the public for coming out and giving their input. I know this has been a project that's been ongoing for quite some time. This is a conceptual stage, and so as they go on to the next steps, we'll see it evolve, and I hope that you will still continue to work with the community and be doing, interacting and really getting the feedback as you start to develop. And Scott, I lost your vision, but I'm pretty sure that that's what you're going to do going forward. So we appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there, what's the next step, then moving on or coming back?
Kelly, you want to talk to that? I think they're
Sure. We don't necessarily need to bring it back unless there's specific changes that you want to see. Of course, if significant changes arise as part of the plan review process, or if there needs to be some more neighborhood input, this is a forum that is easy for us to bring things back to. So you can certainly sort of read that up to staff and how the process goes. But if you feel the need to see it at the design review committee level again, please let us know.
Okay, does anybody feel that it needs to come back to design review? Dennis?
I'm happy with staff making that determination based on what they see. And if they think it's significant enough to warrant another meeting, then they can recommend to them that they do. But if staff is more than capable of, I think, implementing a lot of the comments that have been made.
Okay, Jeff?
Great.
And Emily?
Agreed.
All right, I support the staff and them working with the applicant, so look forward to seeing it at the next step, unless there are any changes. Thank you. All right, I'm going to move on to committee member comments and reports. It's the summer, back to school started this week, so I think we're have a little bit cleared calendars right now. No, I'm kidding.
Something that kind of caught my eye when Nick was talking about street lighting is that obviously school districts are their own jurisdiction. I live next to an elementary school and they have street lights, parking lights, lots of lights. But again, they make that determination and not the city.
All right, director's report.
Yes, thank you. One thing I'll note is we don't have another item scheduled for you coming up for the next typical hearing date. We will be seeing a little project for Ramona Road, not far from this project site, which is the expansion of the Woods Humane Society. They want to expand their facility to be a full service adoption center for dogs and cats on Ramona Road. And so that's going to be a conditional use permit. We'll stop by the DRC before we go to Planning Commission with that. One thing I do want to bring up is the format of hearings and whether the DRC would like to continue this virtual style or go to in-person meetings. The City Council this week did meet with a hybrid style meeting. It worked pretty well. We're not going to have that option with DRC and Planning Commission because we won't have the staffing to be able to provide the technology. So we have to decide whether we want to remain full virtual or go full in person. But we won't be able to really do the hybrid. People can call in, people can do things like that, but we won't be able to have the flexibility of being full hybrid. So I wanted to float that concept. I think with Planning Commission, we're probably going to stay virtual for a little while just because it works pretty well there. But with DRC, my feeling is sometimes it might work better to be in a room and be hands-on. But I just wanted to throw that to the committee members, see if you had any thoughts on that.
I'll make mine brief because I have a few minutes before I should have left, but I got a couple minutes. I'd like to see it stay in this format till the end of the year. And the only reason being is we had 22 attendees. We don't usually get that. And having all of the, not being able to go to a hybrid style, it was nice for council. But I think that we've been seeing more people participate because they can call in or they can do Zoom. So in that format, I don't know how everybody else feels, but it's up to you, Jeff, Emily, or Dennis to chime in.
I agree. This format works well, and it seems like all of our meetings that have been on Zoom, we've been seeing more participation than we have. When the Planning Commission was meeting in person, we'd have one person or nobody show up. So the fact that we've been having so many people participate has been really good.
The virtual world, although we don't get to touch each other, has created positive changes. And this is obviously one of them, more participation, which I appreciate very much. So I agree.
Especially as we have larger projects come to play. So, okay.
All right. That makes my life easy. No problem at all.
All right. I guess this meeting is adjourned. Bye, everyone.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Be safe, everybody.
You too.